who may be watching remotely, a recording of this meeting will be made available on the Council's YouTube channel after the meeting has concluded, should anyone also wish to view it. Just to confirm, as a Council, we welcome the use of the Welsh language within our public meetings, but I can confirm that I have not received any notifications or requests to use Welsh today. Therefore, the meeting will be conducted in English only. As a reminder, may I remind members to refrain from using the chat facility and instead use the raised hand icon to indicate when you wish to speak. Please could you also keep your microphones muted when not talking so there aren't any interruptions encountered. So moving on to the agenda, declarations of interest. Can I ask members in alphabetical order to state whether they have any declarations of interest to declare? I don't think there are many. There might be some schools. So, Councillor Best.
Nothing to declare.
Councillor Cowles. Councillor Cowles on.
Yeah, he's on.
Oh, did he shake his head?
He looks like he's frozen.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Councillor Cowles, I think you're frozen.
Yeah, he's just left. He's probably trying to breathe.
Okay. But Councillor Janet Jones.
I'm a governor of Blanavon Heritage School, but nothing in this report that I'm involved in. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Nick Jones?
He's not there, Chair.
No. Councillor Price? Can't see. Caroline, no. Myself, no, I have anything to declare. Councillor Thomas?
Yes, Chair. I have a relative that works in Abersycon Comp, and my grandson also attends Cwmbran High School, and I'm a governor at Nant School.
Thank you. Councillor Watkins?
I'm a governor at Our Lady of the Angels Primary School in Cwmbran.
Thank you. Councillor Williams?
I'm a governor at Pontywood Primary and Woodlands Primary.
I don't know whether you heard that. Pontywood Primary and Woodlands, yeah. And Victoria Haller.
I'm a governor at Ascol Panteg.
Thank you very much, everyone. So it takes us on to the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of March. Now, this was prior to the elections. So I've looked at the attendance, and it's Janet Jones and Colette Thomas there that were present at those meetings. I don't know about Vicky, but would you mind confirming that those minutes relate to the report received?
Yes, Chair, true record.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you.
Yes, Chair.
So we confirm those minutes. Thank you very much. Action sheet. Agenda item 4. Please could members confirm if they have any questions and whether they are happy with the action sheet. Similarly, if anyone is against or wishes to abstain. So we look at them first. There's a few things to come off it, I think, Leanne. So shall we go through them one at a time? I can enlarge my screen a moment. All right. The first one in minute section is 5.6, and that information was emailed out on the 28th. So are we happy to have that removed?
Yes, Chair.
Yes.
There's a couple that need. The next one is 5.8, EAS officer to provide members of the committee on a termly update. So we leave that on because it's a termly update, and we'll keep a reminder of it. I think if Leanne, rather than go through them all at the same time, if we remove the ones that already been actioned, are you happy to remove those? And then keep on the ones that need to give us a reminder if we're receiving other reports?
Yes, Chair.
You okay?
Yeah.
Yes, Chair.
Okay. So we move the action sheet. With that actions for Leanne to remove any actions that's already been completed and presented at the next meeting with the ones that are on there. Fine, thank you very much. That takes us to agenda item 5, improvement to self-evaluation and improvement process within education, the post-inspection action plan, ESTIN recommendations 2 and 3. The purpose of this report is to provide the committee with details of the actions proposed to address ESTIN's recommendations 2 and 3, in relation to self-evaluation and improvement processes within the service area, as detailed in the draft post-inspection plan. You've all received copies now of the draft inspection plan. Yeah?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, good. May I welcome Dermot? Well, Dermot's online, is he? No, it's just John today. So may I welcome John Tushingham? And Andrew Powell is online, I believe. So, Deputy Chief Officers of Education to the meeting. Can I ask officers if they could provide members with a brief overview of the main points within the report? And I stress brief, this should take no longer than 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. Yeah, I don't intend to go through this in much detail, but I'll take you through the main blocks, if that's okay. Estin visited us in March of this year. I'm sure you're all aware. They found a number of concerns which, taken together, they deemed Torvine was an authority that needed significant improvement. And on page 2 of the report, some of those issues are highlighted in paragraph 3.1. That led to 4 specific recommendations, and the report and this meeting today is concentrating on recommendations 2 and 3, which are largely around performance management matters and self-evaluation, and there's some crossover between those 2 areas. Just in terms of the information that was provided for the meeting today, we thought it important to provide the extracts from the inspection report, which are showing in Appendix 1. Again, I don't intend to go through those in detail, but they set the scene for everything that follows and for the discussion that we'll have this afternoon. We, fairly swiftly after Estin left us, started to work on what we thought the response was in relation to the recommendations. And we've included those as Appendix 2 to the report. It's quite a long list for each of the recommendations, and I'm sure we'll get into some of the detail as we go through. We haven't waited for Estin to review what we think we need to do, as shown in Appendix 2. We've been taking action really pretty much from the beginning of April after the inspection. And paragraph 4.5 details some of the activities that have been going on. Some of that is about capacity and making sure that we've got the right people in the right posts to take us on to the next stage of development and education, which we fully accept is a challenging stage, and we needed to make sure that the right people are in post. Some are about processes and the relationship both within the service, the relationship between the service and the rest of the council and schools, and relationships with organisations such as the Education Achievement Service. But again, I'm sure you've read the report, so I won't go through that line by line. We've also, in preparation for an improvement conference that was held recently with Estin, set out what we think our success criteria should be for these recommendations and for the others which you'll consider later in your agendas for scrutiny for this year. And we've included those as Appendix 3. And I think it's fair to say that the success criteria was the main focus for discussion at the improvement conference that we had with Estin recently. An area that is probably the one that needs the most ongoing development in terms of this plan. So although there is a post-inspection action plan that as soon as we have heard from Estin that they don't see there's any fundamental flaws with what we're proposing, will be finalised. In essence, it will evolve still as we move along, and some things that we've got in there at the moment will change shape, and it may be necessary to add some additional things as we go through the activities and identify if there are any further gaps. Just in terms of the risks and challenges, I said before that we fully accept Estin's recommendations. Difficult though that was at the time and still is. We know we've got a lot of work to do and we've got a committed body of staff and we know we've got the support of the organisation to deliver on it. But I have to say that the significant risk here is for children, is a risk. Children and young people. Yes, it won't be particularly good for the reputation of the council, but fundamentally, if we aren't working as effectively and efficiently as we should be, then we can't possibly say that we're getting the best for our children and young people in the borough. So we don't underestimate both the significance and importance of what it is that we've got to do. I've spoken briefly about the Improvement Conference. It was a couple of weeks ago now. We haven't had a written response from it. It was a constructive conversation over 2 half days. I think I'm safe in saying that there were no significant flaws pointed out in that conversation, but clearly Estin need to go away and there's a degree of moderation that takes place after such events. So I can't categorically say what will be in the letter that follows from that process, but we are expecting it shortly, and the expectation is that as soon as it arrives, we'll be sharing it with this committee and with members more generally. The issue that we did come away with from the conference really was about how clear we were, and I mentioned this before, in defining how success looks. We're good at processes in terms of describing what a process needs to be. It's not always easy to link that directly to a specific outcome. We've done some work in the inspection action plan as it stands at the moment to try and do that, but we accept that we've got a bit more work to do. And I think that probably, if there's any main message in the response to Estin after that conference, I think that will probably be it. I don't propose to go through the reports in any more detail, Chair, unless you'd like me to. I think that just sets the scene in terms of the information that's in front of you, and I'm more than happy to answer the questions, which I know you've got.
Thank you, John. I don't know whether Andrew wants to come in before we go straight into questions.
Good afternoon, Chair. No additional comments from me, thank you.
Thank you. Members, before we start the questions, the pre-agenda order that we agreed, I just agreed with Councillor Williams that she'll take number 8 and number 18 together. So if you're happy with that, because they link and it looks to be a possible recommendation as well. So, okay, so we'll start with question 1, if that's okay with you, John, and I'll take that one. And it's about the bottom of page 19. Within the reports pack, you state that the review of school improvement partner allocations has taken place and has been agreed to consider capacity to support. What does this actually mean? And have you reviewed the EAS officer capacity and capability? It's a good one to start with.
Chair, I'm happy to pick up on that question. So each month we have a quality assurance meeting with EAS, and during the September one we looked at the number of schools that each school improvement partner was allocated to. The main model that operates in the region is that existing head teachers act as school improvement partners, and it's very rare that they've got their own workload of their own schools in addition to the workload associated with being a school improvement partner. So we wanted to make sure that no individual SIP, as we call them, school improvement partner, was overloaded. Having reviewed it, there was one school improvement partner that we had a query about in terms of the number of schools. This was a school improvement partner that's actually employed from outside of the region. But having looked at the schools that this individual was employed to support, we could see that there was a range of need. The schools that they're supporting in Torvine do need a higher level of support, but the schools that they were supporting elsewhere were just the standard 5 days a year allocation. the model that's operated from that school is called a learning network school. So it's not just the one individual, it's a range of staff. It could be the head teacher, deputy, head of science, head of year that would be working with schools. So having talked through the model, the amount of staff that will be supporting the schools, we were satisfied actually that there was adequate capacity from that one school to support the school in Torvine that they were working with. In terms of the other SIPs, we were satisfied that there was very low numbers of schools that they were working with, largely one, maybe two. So we felt it was appropriate capacity for them.
And the capability? It's all well having people there, but if they don't know their job?
Sure. So one of the queries we raised with ES and the school was about the way that support had been documented before and whether follow-up actions had been completed. So there's a document called Notes of Activity that all schools improvement partners complete once they do a piece of work with the school. And it was picked up before that these were not being routinely completed or not completed in detail, so that we could actually be reassured that the schools are making progress. ES recognised this and they've put extra investment into their staffing structure. So they've created the role of senior school improvement partners, and their role is to quality assure their school improvement partners working in Torvine and across the region. So we really welcome this. It's been a really good response to the query that we've raised. At the moment, we have no issues. We're regularly monitoring the amount of activity of the school improvement partners in schools and their documentation of the support. We've had no concerns picked up so far. What's reassuring is that there are these new roles that have got this quality assurance role as well. So as well as it being my job to check the notes of activity, there's an internal mechanism within EAS which is new to provide additional reassurance.
Thank you, Andrew. Do you need anything to add to that, John? Are you okay?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay, we'll take you to question 2, which is Vicky Holer. Vicky.
Thank you. Afternoon. Okay, so at the top of page 20, you state that the LA and EAS partnership meetings have taken place monthly, then is now fully documented and demonstrates more rigour. How are you carrying out these meetings with more rigour, and how are you evaluating the impact?
Okay, so there was an issue previously that these meetings hadn't taken place regularly, and though discussions were taking place, that it wasn't documented what follow-up actions were required. So that has been in place for a number of months now. There are a set of agreed actions, and we're absolutely rigorous in making sure that they're followed up and there's no lapses. In terms of the quality assurance, we're using a whole range of materials. So we're using where staff have gone into school and they've carried out what we call a FADE report. It's an evaluation. We're looking there to make sure that they're of a sufficient quality. I've talked about the notes of activity, the NOAs previously. We're making sure that actually school improvement partners are going into schools now and they're doing face-to-face work. That was a real challenge during COVID, and that has provided a real challenge for the local authorities across the region, and that it's been reliant on remote working, where actually you want to go in, you want to look at books, you want to listen to learners, you want to do learning walks, you want to talk to staff. So that was a real challenge. That's something we're being really rigorous with pursuing now, that it's about face-to-face real evaluation of what's happening within schools. The other thing that we've recently started is an annual cycle of evaluating school development plans. So that's something that all schools are required to produce. It's a 3-year plan. Again, we're having face-to-face meetings in schools to talk through the evaluation basis that the head teachers have for identifying their school development priorities. That's one aspect. The next step is to agree with the heads what levels of support, what specific support they need to address their school development plan priorities. And that could be support from the local authority, it could be from the EAS, it could be something more specialised that needs to be brokered in. That's taking place now. All the secondary meetings will take place before half term. And we've got a number of schools, primary schools, that we've identified as a priority. Maybe they haven't been inspected recently. Maybe they didn't have a face-to-face school development plan meeting during the last year because of COVID, but various ways of prioritising them. So it's a real mixture. It's those discussions with heads. It's looking at the self-evaluation that takes place within school. It's also making sure that we're documenting all concerns and any follow-up actions within those monthly partnership meetings.
Thank you, Andrew. Vicky, are you happy with that?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, can I just add a supplementary to that? With the head teachers actually agreeing their degrees of support needed, do they have deadlines so that they're aware when this will happen, or you know, it's all well and good putting it in a document, but if it doesn't come to fruit, then is there a deadline in that agreement?
Yeah, and actually this is something we've revised again this year. This has been revised on a regional basis. All schools will have a single plan, so that's a support plan of support provided by the ALA or the EAS. And what we've wanted to make sure is we have a termly check-in that has the support that's been agreed, been delivered, and is it having the right impact that it should be? So that we're building in a termly review against these single plans to make, as well as keeping a monitor, is the SDP priority on track? Is the support being delivered? Is it the right support? Recognise it's too long to let things run for a year and then review it. So that's why we're building in these termly checks. For schools that are having higher levels of support, so they could be schools in an STEM category, or those that just feel actually just need a bit of extra help for whatever particular reason, they'll participate in what's called a team around the school meeting. So again, that will be at least half-termly, and at least termly, and it'll focus on, again, the progress against their SDP priorities, progress against the single plan. Have we delivered what we promised we would? And then just addressing any other issues that have come up in the meantime. For the schools in special measures, so you've got Cumberland High and Gwynllw, they participate in a half-termly multi-agency meeting. So that in effect, that's a team around the school plus, because it involves Welsh Government and it involves Estyn. So this half term already, we've had the Cumberland High meeting, Gwynllw meetings taking place on Friday. And just to reflect on the Cumberland High meeting, it was a really constructive meeting because you've got Estyn, you've got Welsh Government in the room. It's all about agreeing what's the priority for the school, how are we supporting them, what resource could be brought in from Welsh Government, and also just getting a direct steer from Estyn of what's working well, what does the school need to build on, and what does Estyn want to see next. So it's a really tailored focus support. I've taken part in these previously in another local authority, and it really did accelerate the progress of the schools.
Thank you, Andrew. That takes us to the next question, which is mine, and that's question 3. On the same page, the 4th bullet point, EAS school improvement partners and curriculum partners are now working in schools and are undertaking a range of supported self-evaluation activities in line with the needs and priorities of each school. I think you might have touched on this now. How do you plan on evaluating this piece of work for appropriateness? You've touched on some of it, and going forward, I think you also need to know when you need to pull out, when it's not working, and what other issues you can do. Thanks.
Yes, so every term there'll be a piece of supported self-evaluation where the school improvement partners will work alongside staff in schools. It could be looking at books, it could be listening to learners, it could be lesson observations. It's agreed in collaboration with the school. And that's where a FADE report would be written, that self-evaluation report. The local authority is asked to identify a thematic review for each term. So what I've requested from EAS for this term and potentially for next term is to review the quality of teaching. And we know that having been in a mixture of hybrid learning, the challenge of not being able to go into schools, it's been very difficult to externally get a picture of what is the quality of teaching across schools. So we've got the general supported self-evaluation work, plus a real focus on the quality of teaching across the school. That's just one piece of evidence we're looking at to determine whether we're providing the right amount of schools and whether they're operating as we'd like them to. Another aspect we've introduced this term is a model called wider group. So wider group is a measure of the amount of support going into schools from the local authority or from EAS. And it could be for human resources, it could be from finance aspect, education welfare service, safeguarding, etc. So each half term we have a meeting to determine whether the support level has changed for each school based on each of those different aspects. If higher levels of support are needed over an extended period of time for one school, that's raising a question about, firstly, is the support right? Why is it not having an impact? So there's an opportunity to then progress to potentially a team around the school meeting, which I touched on, so we can have a more in-depth conversation with the schools about why isn't it working. Similarly, if we see the level of support is automatically reducing over time, then actually want to capture why was that, what worked really well, and let's write a case study, let's learn from that. So I guess that I'm talking about lots of different processes at the moment, but we've got quite a complex web of self-evaluation and tracking processes that we've established across schools to help pick up where early intervention is needed, where higher levels of support is needed, or equally where things have really gone well and we need to learn from it.
Thank you. Councillor Janet Jones is the next question, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Andrew. How will you ensure you hold the regional consortium to account effectively going forward?
Okay, so it's largely drawing on those processes that I've talked about. So we've got at least half-termly and as a standard approach, a termly check-in on those school development plan priorities. If things are not progressing, if things are not on track, then we want to know why. Those are our core measures, so that will be discussed as standard in our monthly meetings with EAS. The other aspect is we have a termly report from EAS on the professional learning offer that they have and the participation of schools within it. So it's a two-way process. That it could be that actually we're questioning why is the school not engaging properly, but also we've had really constructive feedback from head teachers over the last few weeks about ways that the professional learning offer could be revised and simplified so they know what to engage in. So that's been shared with EAS, and they're currently actually considering how to address that. In July, we met with all heads and we asked them their view on the provision from school improvement and the local authority. And it was really helpful, the feedback. There's a separate report that's been shared with EAS, that's been logged within the monthly quality assurance meeting, and they will make a response. I've already had some conversations with the EAS, and we both feel it was really constructive criticism, in effect, that we can learn, we can be better from. But it is all logged in that monthly quality assurance meeting, and like I say, actions are agreed, and they are followed up if they're not addressed.
Andrew, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Takes us to question 5, which is going to be asked by Councillor Best, please.
Thank you, Chair. In the report, it mentions that in relation to recommendation 3, a new planning template has been issued to team leaders, and that current team plans are being revisited. How have you ensured consistency amongst the other plans that the council has? For instance, the county plan, plans that the EAS may have, and the Welsh Education strategic plan?
Thank you, Councillor. It's a really significant point, isn't it? Because one of the regular mantras in the council is about the golden thread and making sure that everything's tied together. It's one of the issues that came up as part of the inspection, and because of the fairly well-established business planning processes within the council, I think actually not just education but services across the council are pretty good at making sure that we recognise where activity is taking place in other plans that we need to then make sure gets translated into what staff at the sharp end do. So for us, the county plan has been emerging in parallel with the process that we've been going through since March, so we've been keeping in touch with that. More significantly for us over the last few months has been the Children and Young People Services Development Plan, which is a fairly significant piece of work, has implications not just for education but across services in the council, and we've had to make sure that we're reflecting what's in there in team planning. But to give a short answer to your question, Councillor, we are still in the process of doing that alignment because of the fact that things have been developing at different paces. I said earlier that we didn't wait to get started on delivering on some of the improvements that we needed to make. That's meant running in parallel with some things and constantly having to look across to make sure that where changes happen with the county plan, where changes happen with the other plans, we're reflecting them. And I suspect that that process will carry on for a little while yet. But it is something that we're keen to make sure staff are aware of. And in terms of the team plans themselves, we've got quite a bit of work completed already. We're still working with staff in terms of how sharp some of the measures and targets are in those plans, but I'd definitely say we've made some good progress in the last couple of months.
Cheers, thank you.
Thank you, John. As I see, Councillor Price is not here, and Councillor Cowell, you have no questions. Do you want to take Councillor Price's questions for us, please?
Yes, of course.
The next one is number 6, which is Councillor Price's question. Thank you.
Yeah. In 4.7 of the report, you state that one of your biggest challenges will be embedding a new approach where there is a culture of performance. So how will you therefore ensure that this is overcome within your service area?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't get the question in that. Could you just repeat what the question is? It's about how we're going to embed a culture. Is that right?
Yeah, so it's in paragraph 4.7 of the report, it says that you state that one of your biggest challenges will be embedding a new approach where there is a culture of performance. So how will you therefore ensure that this is overcome within your service area?
Okay, thank you, Councillor, and thanks for the clarification. The thing with a culture is you can't just switch it on or switch it off. It takes quite a lot of effort to create a performance culture, and I'll sit here now and say that we haven't got it, and I think it'll take a long period to achieve it. The way that we're going to do it, I think, is to involve everybody to a much greater extent than we have before. I think we are guilty of putting too much emphasis on too few people to run some of our processes through. And, you know, they did a good job, but the problem is that the knowledge, the understanding isn't wide enough. And if the knowledge and the understanding are not wide enough, then responsibility and accountability are more difficult to instill across a service. So it's a long journey for us. We're starting really by looking at all of our processes, and I do want to stress that what Estin didn't find was a complete absence of process. What they found were processes that needed improving. So that's what we're doing at the moment with staff. We're taking things back to the basics. We're making sure everybody understands what all of the various pieces are to achieve improvement in the service. Getting them involved. They've got a lot of expertise, actually, that we're learning from as well as a leadership team. They do these things, you know, at the cold face, and we're learning about where processes might be improved and reflected back into the planning. But one of the mainstays for this is about that performance culture. People understanding where their job fits in to the overall work that the service and the council want to achieve. Having clear understanding of what it is that they're there to deliver, and really the responsibility then of the service as a whole to check whether progress is being made, support progress if it's not being made or it's not being made quick enough. And I think it's those relationships that are probably going to bring about the culture more than the processes, involving people more, having the conversations, being quite clear about where accountability sits, supporting people when they need it, challenging people if they aren't doing a job that we need them to do. And you know, I can't, unfortunately, I can't provide a route map that will take you from where we are now to culture is now in place. But I think it's something that certainly Estin will be able to challenge and see in future. And something that I think 12 months on, I think we'll be able to look back and see that actually we've got a far more engaged workforce, and that's got to be a good thing. I think Andrew would like to come in there as well, Chair, if
Thanks.
possible.
You're on mute, Andrew.
Sorry, it's not a Teams meeting unless somebody does that. Apologies. So one of the mechanisms we've introduced is to develop our extended leadership team, called the EELTs, the Education Extended Leadership Team. So this is where we're coming together at least every half term as team leaders and senior leaders to actually just build relationships and build a shared understanding of what we're trying to do. So we had, just as an example, we had a session last week and we focused on some of the new processes we're introducing so that everyone had a chance to actually pull them apart and clearly understood them. But we also used this session to start focusing on how to write evaluatively. How are we properly assessing if we're making an impact, and how do we capture that? Because it can be really challenging to actually to do and to communicate it effectively. We're going to follow that up in the next session, looking at actually how do we report right in a really consistent way, how do we risk assess, and also about how the EAS works closely with the local authority, because there's a recognition that some teams would never have met or worked with people within the EAS. It's not a natural alignment. So that's a really useful forum for us all to be on the one shared page. It's even as simple as using team spaces and co-writing documents within a team space. There's technological aspects, there's cultural aspects, there's just core relationships. So we're building a program. We've got the program for this term built. We don't want to develop it too far in advance at the moment, because we want to actually assess what are we doing, what are the needs at the moment. We've just completed our performance management targets. So again, we're pulling those together and want to make sure that where there's regular or consistent developmental needs within the department, we'll address those as a group through the extended leadership team. It's about that co-construction and more opportunities to work together. It's been an interesting experience joining the local authority during COVID, because you're not having a chance to actually just sit alongside people and actually get to know people and form pieces of work. So that's what we're being really rigorous in actually creating more opportunities to be together in the room, so to know who each other are, how we work, and what our shared expectations are. And as John said, that's not a quick fix, but we're creating opportunities to do that.
Yes, Councillor Williams.
So I just wanted to kind of add a comment to that, really, from what you were both saying. I think for me, the word that sums up what you're saying in terms of creating that culture is aiming for co-responsibility, that sense of co-responsibility, which comes from building relationships where everyone feels that they're valued and are really clear in their understanding of their roles. So I think that's a really key thing, and I completely agree that's something that grows organically. It's not something that you can impose. So thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Thomas, take the next question, please.
Thank you, Chair. On page 24 of the reports pack, the last bullet of Eston's observations under their recommendation 3 relates to scrutiny, not always receiving the information to be able to carry out their function effectively. How will this be approved upon going forward, and how will you help the Education Monitoring Subcommittee to carry out their roles more effectively? Thank you.
I think if I start with this one, and then Andrew may want to come in. I think for new members, we can pinpoint probably quite precisely where this issue started, and it was at the time that there was a national shift in what information, particularly about performance in schools, it was possible to share. So there are some limitations in what information is available and can be shared. But the emphasis going forward, I think it harks back a little bit to what Andrew was saying with the wider group process that we've got as a group of officers in the council. We do have information about schools and with schools, not least in terms of the school development plans and progress that is clearly logged in that process and then tracked as the year progresses. And I think what we need to do is agree with you quite how and when that information is presented in a better way than we've done before or to date. I think it's been an interlude of probably 1 or 2 years, Chair, if I remember correctly, where this came up, and it's not just in Torfaen, this is an issue in across Wales. But Andrew, I don't know if you want to come in specifically in terms of the subgroup work, because I think you've been involved in some discussions on that.
Thank you, John. So, yeah, one thing I've already shared with scrutiny is a report about what data is available to elected members. I know we have a meeting coming up in a few weeks, and I really would welcome a conversation about what you would like from that available data and how we can best talk through it with you. I think there's also, I'd welcome a discussion on professional learning needs around the group in terms of the changes that are taking place within education at the moment. There's a monumental shift in terms of additional learning needs, curriculum for Wales, assessment of learners, where I think we're all battling with this new field. The data that used to be available is not there, and it feels very uncomfortable for all of us. EAS are commissioning a professor to do some work with all local authorities and all schools about what assessment will look like in this new world. That's literally just starting in the next few weeks, and again, that would be something I'd really welcome an opportunity to discuss with scrutiny, because it's how we make sure all learners are appropriately progressing, because there isn't one standard model that each school needs to use at the moment. So it feels a very uncertain world for everybody. I spoke with head teachers at their meeting last week, and across the board, everyone feels anxious about this because everyone recognises the importance of what we're all doing and wants to wants to do right by the children, and they want to be able to communicate effectively to governors and to the local authority that it's an effective school, and not having the one system that we used to have is a real challenge for that.
I think there's always also a gap. Previously, being a governor, we were included in lots of training. I'm talking about elected members now. If they're also a governor, they're included in the governor training of the EAS. If there's elected members that are not governors, then they miss out, and there's a gap there that they're missing out on, perhaps bringing in the new curriculum and that type of information that is flowing. It's flowing freely with people in the day-to-day, but some others are being left out and left behind and not understanding it. And I think that's highlighted a gap for me since becoming a non-governor, if that's a word. But I felt really involved. I knew what I was talking about. As a chair of governors, I knew what was experienced in the school, and you could transfer that into your councillor life. But being a non-governor for elected members, there is a gap there. So, thanks.
That's definitely something we can work on with you, Chair. It's not right if that's the case, and it should be a fairly easy gap to close.
Question 9. We're missing question 8. So question 9 is Councillor Watkins. Would you ask a question, please?
I will. So on page 26, activity 2.1.3, you state that you will have agreed, updated, robust annual mechanisms for feedback from head teachers on quality of support provided by all council services. Why have you not considered to obtain this feedback from head teachers on a more regular basis? Because I feel on an annual basis it could be too long.
Some of this is work that we've already had in place. So we've surveyed as part of the region head teachers and their views on both services that the Education Achievement Service provide and council services. I think Caerphilly ran the council services survey last on behalf of the region. In terms of the frequency, yes, maybe annually is infrequent, but we've got to consider that the head teachers' workload itself might get in the way of if we did it more frequently. But there are lots of other opportunities where head teachers can raise issues with us, and we would rather that they didn't wait for a survey to raise them. I think it's fair to say over the last few years that there have been issues with technology, there have been issues with buildings, which schools have got frustrated about, and through the regular meetings that we have, through the professional links that we've got with head teachers in schools and their staff, we encourage them to be free-flowing with those concerns and not store them up, because the sooner we get to hear about them, the better, and the more likely it is we can stop whatever's going on from happening. So personally, I think annually is frequent enough, and together with the other mechanisms that we got for feedback, but we'd still keep it under review, and if need be, increase it. But I think we would just then find that heads would find it was too frequent for that purpose.
Question 10 is in 2.1.4, you confirm that you will be commissioning an external peer review of self-evaluation and performance management systems and their impact. Who will carry out this review?
So we're in conversation with the Welsh Local Government Association at the moment, where authorities find themselves in the position that we're in. There is, and in other positions, there's a peer support mechanism within the local government family. So the conversation started with Sharon Davis, who used to work for the council. She was part of the improvement conference. She's gone away to look at what options there might be. We're talking about next year, so we've got about a 12-month period to really bottom it out. But we don't know which partners are available to do it. There's been a very successful inspection results in Swansea recently. Paris have gone on a journey over the last years, but they've come out of follow-up with Estin, and it may be that when you're picking a peer review team, you need a mix of people with a mix of experience who can actually get underneath what it is that you're doing based on their own experiences, and that's where we've got to the moment, but obviously still work to do.
Thank you. We all happy? Any supplementaries? Yeah, good. Vicky Hall at question 11, please.
I think we just lost her on Teams, Chair.
Yeah. We've just lost Vicky, unfortunately. I'll ask her a question. She will come back in if she's got any supplementaries to the answer. So the question that Vicky was going to ask was, has the shared ambitions document been consulted upon with the head teachers, young people and the wider school community to ensure that there is a shared vision?
I'll pick up on that, Chair. Sorry, John. So yeah, that work isn't due to start until later this term. So the shared ambitions document was written a while ago, but we recognise it needs to be revised. It needs to reflect the new situation that the local authority is, plus the new education framework we're operating in. So later this term, we'll start consultation with heads and other stakeholders about what is our vision, what are we aiming for, what should that document look like. We also want to align it with the Children and Young People's Plan. So the aim is for it to be completed by April next year, but the work on it will start later this term.
Only to add that the first shared ambitions document was born during the height of COVID and did result from fairly extensive conversations with the head teachers in a head teacher strategic group that we had at the time. But yeah, Andrew's comments really take us to the future. So.
Thank you. Can we make sure that Vicky gets the answer to that question? She can watch the webcast, I know, but it was her particular question. That takes us to question 12, which is Councillor Jones's question, please.
Thank you, Chair. In 2.3.1, you confirm that you will develop quality assurance processes to review the 2022-2023 team plans with staff and apply new process when devising 23-24, plans. What will these quality assurance processes entail, please?
This is one of the areas of work where we're operating as a senior leadership team differently than we have previously. And the way that team planning worked in the past was very much that individual teams in the service detailed what it was that they were going to do in the year ahead. And they were submitted through the corporate process, and that was it. There was no real challenge across the service, not enough engagement certainly across the service, and because of that, I think we're probably guilty of it being a little bit siloed at times, and we could definitely achieve some improvement. So the processes that we've already undertaken and are ongoing because of the way that the team planning timetable works is we're having individual conversations with teams about the team plan content, but that's after conversations with senior leadership team about what constitutes the right activities to go in that plan, the right measures and impacts. We've got further on the content and the measures than impacts, and I think I referenced that earlier in today's meeting about impact is one of those things sometimes that it takes a little bit longer to actually get under the skin of. And once they've drafted their plan, we're going through a process, again, as a senior leadership team, of reviewing whether or not we want to modify it in any way or talk to them about modifying it. Because, again, this is that change where rather than it being held in the hands of a few, we're trying to get a much more a dialogue going to help people understand. So what we want to do is, if we think changes need to be made and we talk to the teams about them, the chances are that next time we do this process, they'll have learned from the first time we did it, and we'll have learned. So it's a two-way thing. So at the moment, we've redrafted the 22-23 plans. We've got some of that alignment work to complete that we were talking about earlier with the other plans because of them being developed in parallel. When it comes to 23-24, which we're expecting will be around about December time, we will be on the second iteration of that exercise with staff to co-construct in a much better way than we've previously done.
Thank you, John. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. The next one was due to be Councillor Price, so Councillor Cowles, can you take the next question, please?
Yes, of course, Chair. So in 2.4.1, you confirm that you will implement a bespoke elected member professional learning programme with the EAS. So the question is, what will this entail, and have you worked with members to gauge what they would find useful to be included into this programme?
Sure, so I'm happy to answer that. So I think it's the 22nd or 23rd of October, I have a meeting with informal scrutiny, and that's one of the agenda items I'd like to discuss at that point is what have been your identified professional learning needs. Also, we're discussing with Councillor Clark about how to take it to wider members, about to identify needs and to implement the system.
That links back, Chair, to the point before about we can close gaps through this process.
Can you repeat that date, please, Andrew? I didn't quite catch it. No.
I think it's the 22nd or 23rd of October. Sorry, 24th. Sorry, Chair, 24th.
24th, right.
So it's the Education Monitoring Task Group.
Yeah.
That takes us to question 14, which is Councillor Best's question, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question, I was going to ask how you'd ensure members of this committee and other members, I know it was brought by Council yesterday, were kept up to date with the progress, but I think most of that was answered in Councillor Williams's question. So simply, how would you best keep members up to date with the progress of the PAP?
You're right. You write a plan, and then it needs to be delivered. So I'm not sure Councillor Clark answered this question yesterday in Council. The first step is to get the post-inspection action plan finalised on the basis of Estin's hopeful approval that we'll get in writing shortly. And then I don't think it's been agreed with scrutiny that this will return as a monitoring item. But certainly, that could be done. There's a lot in it, and I think you probably want to know about the things that are not going to plan rather than know about the things that are going to plan. So, yeah, some kind of exception reporting. I mean, we've got the two boards that were created after March, which we know we'll be reporting progress into. And I don't really see why that information couldn't be shared more widely.
Thank you. Okay. Next question is question 15, which is Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. In bullet point 3.2 on page 31, you confirm that you will improve effective use of data to effectively evaluate impact of activity across LA services. How do you plan on doing this, particularly to determine the impact of teaching and learning and the lack of data there is around this?
There are two bits to this, Councillor. One is more about the information that we keep centrally, and a lot of that information comes directly through schools, through computer systems that feed our systems. And then there's the school-based performance, which I think we touched upon in earlier questions. I'll deal with the first bit, if that's okay, and then if Andrew has anything more to add to the second bit, then we'll pass it across to him. We've got quite powerful systems in terms of particularly tracking groups of learners. It's a system called Capital One. And it directly lifts information from schools, from a SIM system that schools use into ours, and it allows us to track things like exclusions, attendance, involvement, particularly around youth, sports development and play. And it's a very good system, but it's not necessarily the easiest of systems to get information from. So the way that we see the development programme for this piece of work is more using the Power BI tools as the window through which you view this information. Power BI is something that the new chief executive, or the chief executive brought with him from Hereford as something that was used there and he found particularly helpful. It's been used in social care to good effect, I think. I think they were the trial to see whether or not it was a appropriate tool to lift information from the various systems, and feedback has been that it is. So what we really need to do, I think, is make sure that the information that we've got is being made available, is more accessible than it's previously been, but significantly that it's being used. And again, it's okay to have data, information, intelligence, whatever you like. If it's not being systematically used to check on whether or not the things that you wanted to happen are happening, or the response to a piece of work delivers what you thought it was going to deliver, then the system is of little use. So to spit back to what we were saying before about working with staff to make sure that they know what information it is that collectively we need to focus on, making sure that that information is accessible, and then making sure that it's used for tracking and decision-making processes. It did happen before. We weren't blind to the information that existed out there. We did routinely look at things like exclusions and attendance. Did we do it to the depth that we can do it? No. And that's the target area for the next few months, to make sure that we lift out the right things. But fundamentally, you want to make sure that your children and young people are in school, attendance. But when they're in school, they're feeling safe and ready to learn, which is making sure that they stay in school. It tends to be around the inclusions agenda in particular, and making sure that they come out of school with a decent background, with some good human qualities and some qualifications at the end of it, which is where we get back into the discussion about schools and the information that we need to track progress. And at that point, I'm going to hand over to Andrew to see if he wants to add anything to previous comments.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So within the last year, Welsh Government launched the National Resource for Evaluation and Improvement. So one of the people to develop this was actually Mark Jones, who's recently been employed as the new head teacher of Gwynllw. So this provides a framework for schools to evaluate the effectiveness of teaching and learning and their overall provision. So it's quite a comprehensive framework. So schools can, in effect, they can choose which aspects of they're using, and they can amend things to however they want for their school. So part of the work of the school improvement partners going forward is to dig into actually what methods are the schools using, what data, what assessment routines are they using to check learner progress, and to just do a bit of quality assurance that it's correct. So I mentioned earlier about the thematic review that we've asked EAS to complete on the quality of teaching and learning. So this is the kind of information that they'll be using to determine whether teaching is effective, because different schools might be using different assessment techniques. Some of them might be using standardized scores. Some of them might be just looking at curriculum statements. It's very much bespoke to the school. Alongside that, there's the school improvement guidance, which has really recently been updated by Welsh Government. This is over the last few months. So again, within that, it's clear about what information schools should be collating, what information local authorities and consortia can draw upon. This is all very new, and this is why one of the professors being commissioned by EAS to start to pull together what are we going to use for Torfaen. So although there's flexibility for individual schools, having spoken with the head teachers, because of the uncertainty around it, that we all feel actually we'd want to define a bit of a Torfaen model that allows a bit of flexibility. Partly because there's safety in numbers, but also because this is new to all of us, and let's trial it. Let's see what's working. Let's all learn together. Within it, it's the standard. We'd always be looking at the standard things of looking at pupil books, listening to learners, lesson observation, learning walks, feedback from the community. but the specifics about how that's done in what context is down to the individual school, and that is the role of the school improvement partner to make sure that the schools are doing it appropriately. When they do the termly supported self-evaluation with schools, this is how they're going to structure it.
Have that question answered, Councillor Thomas? Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
Just, welcome back, Vicky. You lost contact with us. So just in answer to your question, it was no, they haven't shared it, and it's going to happen at the end of this term. Okay, thanks. That takes us to the next question, which is Councillor Williams.
Actually, this is quite linked with what you've been saying. On page 31, 33, there are quite a few actions for the systems officer when we're looking at it, and quite a few that have been, due to start in September, October. Just to see sort of what specific progress in those particular areas that come under the systems officer, how those have started and how they're carrying on.
I think Andrew mentioned in answer to one of the questions before about the performance review sessions with staff. So for as long as I can remember, and I've been in the council for quite a while now, we've had a system whereby there's an annual review of performance with individual members of staff, and there's a 6-monthly catch-up. We may have done it a little bit out of sync this year, although actually it's not far out, because of our need to really galvanise staff in the response to the inspection. We started off the process of performance reviews. As part of that review process, in addition to talking about the things that have gone well, we talk about the things that didn't go so well. We have the conversation with staff about the activities and challenges for the 12 months coming up. And we talk about professional learning and what professional learning has taken place, and also what professional learning needs to take place. Now, what we've just done is complete the process of those reviews with staff. The next stage, which is this month, is to gather in that activity that's already taken place and the needs that have been identified for professional learning going forward. And as a senior leadership team, we need to review that. I'm sure there'll be pockets of similar need across the service. There may be some very specific needs for certain individuals that we need to think about. But I've got to say as well that this will have to have more emphasis than it has in the past, simply because we had the inspection result that we had. We know we've got to change. And I think, we're probably, certainly in the performance review sessions I've had with my staff, we're spending longer on this than we have done of late. Really to try and understand where learning needs to take place. And that doesn't necessarily mean sitting in front of a computer screen for a half-hour web meeting or training program. It's the experiential stuff as well, of looking at what other people do, talking to other authorities about what they do. I mentioned previously that Paris have been in a similar situation to where we are, so they've changed some of their approaches, and they're a council that we may well need to speak to in the coming weeks and months, and likewise those that have really positive inspection results as well. So that's where that piece of work is at the moment, and it is about developing staff. We've got a really committed bunch of staff, and that's one message I can't emphasise enough this afternoon. It's just our activity hasn't always been as purposeful as it needs to be, and we want to make sure that the staff understand that. This is not, nobody's having a go at them. This is just about, okay, if we do things slightly differently, if we learn how to do some things differently, we'll get a much better outcome.
Thank you. Could I ask one particular one that interested me in it's 3.4.1, discussing, which came under that, the systems officer, discussing education service consultation requirements with the Torvine Youth Alliance and agreed plan for engagement. How's that getting on?
The Alliance is relatively new for any member that isn't aware of the background. There was a group before, but the Alliance is a new name and a new format. That conversation is due this month with them about the priorities. One of the things that we're acutely aware of is that the Alliance, I'm sure, will have no shortage of people saying, think about this, discuss that. What matters about that Alliance is that they set their own agenda.
Yeah.
This is young people coming together, and it's important that they discuss what they want to discuss. So I suppose it's a little bit like visioning in a way that we're going to suggest things that we'd really like them to help us with.
Yeah.
And it's not about just talking to them, it's about actually trying to get some help from them in terms of either system design or service design. But ultimately they will decide what they want to talk about, and that's exactly how it should be.
Thank you.
One of the things that's always concerned me about discussing with a particular group, whether it's a youth forum or a school council, is how it's fed back to other pupils and young people. We have agendas for school councils or youth forums, but how do they actually feed back so that everybody knows what is going on? And that's always been a concern of mine. It's ideally to pick a certain amount of people for a particular group and a particular question, but how do we get everybody involved in their future?
And I think that part of the answer to that is that the Alliance is not the only consultative group in the authority. So if you think about individual schools or school councils, and it's important, isn't it, that you get a broad spectrum of feedback, because the Alliance has got some very intelligent contributors to it, but they are a small group, and there may be other views out there that need to be harnessed. So I think the conversation that the participation officer who supports the Alliance, who sits outside of education, is having with the Alliance is, okay, you're one tier, but how does that link to school councils? How does it link to other consultative processes in the council, so that you get the broad message, and that yes, the feedback also goes to the wider group, not just a small group.
Yes.
Thank you, John. My question is question 70, which is, why couldn't Appendix 2 and 3 be merged together? I feel that it would be much easier to view and see the linkages of each activity and the associated success criteria and intended impacts all together to be able to evaluate progress appropriately.
That's a fair point. It's a fair point, I'm not going to argue. They were developed for different purposes, and just so members are aware, we were preparing the papers for this meeting at the same time as we were preparing for the Improvement Conference. So Appendix 3 were specifically designed for the Improvement Conference, because we felt it was important to put in front of Estin and the other contributors to that exercise that we were doing things, and that there was progress being made, and where we ultimately wanted to be. So yeah, how it's presented in the future, I suspect, will change for design for particular purposes.
Thank you for that. We've got the last two questions now, which will be question 8 and question 18 merged, I think, Councillor Williams. So thank you.
Yeah. Actually, because these are the last couple of questions, I'm sure everyone wants to say we'd like to thank you for this report, because it's incredibly detailed. It must have taken some doing, so thank you. So yes, kind of two parts to this question, if that's okay. The first part, well, but they're linked. The first part, so looking, you make mention of the MER, the Monitoring, Evaluation and Review Framework, which I wouldn't mind, it'd be helpful to explain that a little bit more. How things link together, basically. So how that links in with the post-inspection improvement plan, how those kind of link in with the shared ambitions document. So sort of how all these things refer to the document. And then I suppose looking at, this is a suggestion, I suppose, rather than a recommendation, so that we can scrutinise things more easily. We wondered whether it would be useful to kind of like do like a sort of red, amber, make things a little bit more diagrammatic. So if we've got, say, recommendations from the PAP and the MER, and the different actions, to see what's actually been completed, what's ongoing, what hasn't been completed, and maybe use a colour coding thing, so that things are, so that if we look at extracts from the document, we can see which bits link in with the inspection plan, just so that we can see things more diagrammatically. And then I think for us it would be easier to frame our questions to you, which hopefully in turn would make that more helpful. Yeah, so really that's just a sort of suggestion about making the report a little bit more accessible and readable. And I do take on board that you said that, you know, this appendix was written for another purpose, but I hope that was clear.
Absolutely clear. Yeah. Should I deal with the two bits in the order that you raised? And I think it might be helpful, Chair, and I'd certainly be happy to do this if we shared through the committee a copy of the monitoring, evaluation and review framework, the MER document.
Yes.
And what I'll do now, if it's okay, is I'll just quickly take you through what it's about. The Council has a performance management framework, always has had, and it's staple activities that take place throughout the year, which guide the Council towards hopefully making the improvements it needs to make. When we sat down after the inspection, we knew that there were strengths in that process, and that we would have to, obviously, as part of a corporate organisation, continue to follow the Council's performance review framework. We thought there was a bit more that was taught about education specific. And it was one of the pieces of learning actually that we picked up with Andrew joining us from Newport, because this is something similar to what they've had in place. But if I just run you through the key processes that it tries to bring together, you get a better sense, I think, of where it sits. Because these are systems. These are individual systems and processes that you can plug any information into them. It's just making sure you've got that structure in which to progress things. So 6-weekly reviews, team performance reviews we call them, that's part of this new approach, where we're saying that every team will have a performance review meeting on a 6-weekly basis. They will all happen roughly at the same time, that there will be a standard approach to the format for those meetings, so that they collect information on progress, challenges, budget, risk, and that gets fed back up into the senior leadership team. So we've got a much better picture at 6 weekly intervals throughout the year of what's going on and where pressures may start to arise, and also of where there's success, because we've got to remember to celebrate that as well. I've mentioned that budget is part of that meeting process. Budget is part of those meetings, but there's also grant work. So budget and grant reviews are another area, another process that we're bringing in to a higher level than we've had them before. There's always been budget monitoring, but we think we can do it better. We think we can actually do it better, and we can learn more from it than we have done in the past. Andrew's mentioned wider group meetings, a method by which we look at what resources we're deploying into schools, which give us a message back about, okay, well, where perhaps do we need to think about our practice? Where do we need to think about support that we're not offering, that we either need to offer or commission? We're talking about the quality assurance meetings with the Education and Achievement Service that Andrew referred to before. We're talking about the surveys and the feedback, including the head teachers' on an annual basis as part of this MER process. We're talking about the council's wider business planning process because we're part of the council, so we can't just go off and do what we want to do. We're part of the corporate body. Risk management forms part of the 6 weekly meetings, but again, it comes back into an arena where we actually have that conversation about those things that potentially could throw us off the track that we want. And with some of these have been developing in parallel as well. So the risk management process that's been updated within the last month or two for the council. We're now putting that into what we need to do as well. Supervision and staff one-to-ones is part of the MER framework. We've talked about those. Individual performance management, again, we talked about those. And then overview and scrutiny is part of the evaluation and review framework. We play an important role in making sure that we provide you with assurances about what we're doing, and you get an opportunity to challenge and support that. And then the final of the 11 processes within MER is more thematic evaluations. And that's an area of work that we will probably do later on. It's more Christmas and beyond because we need to get the basics in place right and running properly before we start taking on bigger pieces of thematic evaluation. But we know we do need to do thematic evaluation. And in actual fact, if it wasn't on your agenda, one of the thematic evaluations for the year, one of the thematic evaluations that we knew we would need to do was around persistence absenteeism. You happen to have it for your next meeting, I think. We know we would have had to have done a piece of work on that anyway because it's an issue in schools. So I hope that gives you a flavour of what the MER includes, but it's having it all together and working in sync. So on the back of this, we've got a calendar which is shared with staff, which says in this period, and it's usually we do it by the month, so we've had one come out at the beginning of October, these are the things that you should all be doing as part of this process. Staff are finding that helpful because there's clarity of expectation. We're finding it helpful because there's consistency of when things are being done, which means that we get the information in a coherent lump rather than fragmented and all different times. And the bit that we will test, because the first proper 6 weekly run will be it's mid-November, is what we do with all of the information that comes from it, the evaluation side and the response. Because if the information we get through is actually, John, in play, for example, no significant risks, John, there's no significant budget issues, we're delivering all of the stuff that we said we were going to deliver, then we won't necessarily need to respond to that other than well done and carry on with what you're doing. Some other areas we may find that the reports we're getting through is budget's tight and we're not sure we're going to be able to afford what we said we were going to do, or performance is not what we expected it to be at this stage and we need to adjust perhaps the practice that we're doing. That's the evaluation. And then the change in response to the evaluation that we need to really start to instill through this MER process.
So just to clarify in my own mind, because I'm a bit thick. So this MER framework has always been in existence. Oh, so this has come out of the inspection, the post-inspection plan.
Yeah, the council has always had a performance management framework for as long as I've been in the council anyway, and I'm sure before. This is a education-specific framework, which is fully in sync with the corporate performance framework. And that is, it's a good question because one of the questions that we had from Estin during the improvement conference was, how do you make sure it remains in sync?
Right. Okay.
And it's a good challenge, and it's one of my main jobs is making sure that if things do change corporately, that we reflect them appropriately in our framework. Equally, some of the developments at the corporate level, I think, have been informed by the conversations we've been having post-inspection. And I think the organisation as a whole is shifting.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Just a second point then about the RAG rating. Yes, Yeah, I think I think we find it easier if we can more simply identify those things where our attention should be.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether it's been agreed quite how that would look, but I take your point.
Thank you very much.
Chair, will you excuse me? Is Councillor Jones?
You've gone mute now. Councillor Jones, I think you're asking to be excused, and we've come to the end of our questions, so no problem at all. I was just going to ask members if they have any supplementary questions while we have the officers in the room with us. I don't see any comments or hands up. I've just got one. I've just sort of asterisked the different, multi-agency, the head teachers multi-agency, wider group, and the EAS, and the Education Extended Leadership Team, and I just wondered whether or not there was any duplication in all of that, and whether or not we could perhaps, you mentioned a web previously, and we need to have some idea of where that web goes and what's being dealt with, so I don't know whether that's possible or not.
I think I'd describe it more as a Russian doll, because they're all interlinked. There are conversations on similar topics taking place at different levels in the service, and that's absolutely how it should be. It's really the level of those conversations and what it leads to that will differ at those different levels. I'm confident, and Andrew will nod or otherwise if he differs. I'm confident that we've not got any unnecessary duplication at the moment, but it is something that we're at the start of this process. At the extended education leadership team meeting that Andrew referred to earlier, and I have to stall when I say that to make sure I get the right number of E's into it. One of the comments and the questions that we've put to the staff is, if as we roll this out, it's not working for you, do let us know, because we can't be certain that this is the most effective and efficient method until we've tried it all. And we do need people to be honest with us. If it's not working properly, it may be that we need to tweak bits of this. And it may be that in some areas we have a slightly modified approach. So if you take, for example, I'll give you a pretty good example of this one perhaps, capital. We're talking about 6 weekly meetings here that have to take place. Well, in the capital world, 6 weeks is too long, and it was fortnightly meetings, and we're continuing with fortnightly meetings. We're still going to feed into the 6 weekly process, but it's examples like that where what we don't want to do is put processes in place that actually stop people from being efficient and effective. So, we've got to try it, and we've got to learn from it, and if we need to change as a response to that, we will.
Yeah.
So you said in response, I totally understand that, that you're confident that, that you hope there won't be duplication, in all these different organisations. Do you think it will become quite clear? Is it sort of something you're looking out for, or do you think it's going to take a while for you to, maybe months or even years, to look back and go, actually, these organisations are duplicating the same work or giving us the same results?
I think we'll see very quickly. There's an area of group working that's not part of the MER, which we need to look at, where there's potential. There's lots of conversations taking place, and is there an opportunity to actually bring some of those conversations together? But in terms of the fundamental processes that form our monitoring, evaluation and review framework, I'm confident as I can be, and I was in corporate performance before I went into education, that this should all mesh together really nicely. The experience that staff have may, say, identify some tweaks, but I wouldn't expect any fundamental shifts required. I really wouldn't.
Andrew, John, Andrew, you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you. Duplication is something right at the forefront of my mind, that we don't want it. So, for example, just in terms of the WESP, the Welsh and Education Strategic Plan, we've got the forum meeting next week, And I want to establish subgroups of that because we realise it's a real priority to take this word forward. However, talking with colleagues, they've already had conversations where they're saying, well, actually, the membership of that subgroup would mirror exactly this, for example, early years group that already exists. Let's mainstream the work into that. The additional learning needs aspect of the Welsh Strategic Plan, having spoken with another colleague saying, well, actually, we've got an ALN, additional learning needs strategy group. Let's mainstream it into that. So really trying to avoid duplication of groups, because otherwise it's just the same people sat around a room talking about marginally different topics, and it's not an effective use of officer time.
I think that was my point, yes. Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah.
Can I just thank officers for their time? I know you've got the day job as well, but the PAP is on extra work on top, and we do recognise the amount of work that you're actually doing and actually achieving. So thank you for the PAP. It's really useful for us to know where we are and where we're going. And I asked officers to leave us now to deliberate our recommendations. Thank you very much. Thanks for everybody for attending.
Chair, can I just make one last comment?
So, do you want to stay, do you, John?
No, but just in terms of, in addition to the day job, the activities in the PAP are the day job, and that's a message that we've really got to work on with everybody. These things are being done because they need to be done, so it is a job, but I do accept what you say. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Just waiting for the officers to leave. Can I just ask members of the committee if there's any gaps there? I know a couple of you dropped out, so whether or not you needed to catch up on any of the answers to your questions, or you missed anything in particular, because we can catch up on now before we go into our recommendations. Anybody? Any comments or questions? Yeah, Vicky?
Hey, please. So that I cut off just as I was asking my question, so I was kind of talking to myself, but you answered that, and then I missed question 12 as well. So the question was, can you confirm that you will develop quality assurance processes? What would these quality assurance processes entail? I missed that one.
Yeah, I just scribbled some notes down on question 12. There's no challenge. It's been redrafted for 22-23, and the second draft is due out for 23-24. Any other notes on that one on question 12? I don't know.
Yeah, I think they're currently working on 22-23 team plans now.
Okay.
They're normally in effect by now, but obviously in light of the recent SM inspection, they're probably being cleansed and brought up to a certain standard. Obviously, they've got their quality assurance processes in place now, and they're meeting with staff on a more regular basis, whether it's through the, what does he call it, the ELT, the Education Leadership Team meetings, and meetings below that. Now, the 23-24 service planning process normally kicks off about now, so the corporate centre will normally write out to officers to say, can you start thinking about your 23-24 team plans in readiness for implementation in April 2023. So that process is just kicking off now, and 22-23 is just being refined, shall we say.
Yeah. Happy with that response? I'm sorry that we lost contact with a couple of you. But, okay, if you've got any queries, Leanne is here, and she'll produce some fantastic minutes, I'm sure, so that you can follow the meeting when the webcast went down. So,
Just come in and
yeah.
Just promoted me to minute taker, Chair.
Well, I don't produce the minutes. Sorry, Geraint.
Geraint just wants to ask members a question a minute. So
yeah, Geraint,
come in.
Yeah, thank you both. At the start of the meeting, Councillor Cowles, you dropped out as we were doing an alphabetical list of declarations of interest. Members sort of mentioned if they were school governors and whatnot, you know, for various schools around the borough. I didn't know if you wanted to declare anything.
Oh yeah, I completely missed that, Geraint. Thank you. Yes, I'm LEA governor at Abersycon Comprehensive School and LEA governor at Blenavon VC Primary School as well.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you for that. Right, we're going on to our recommendations now. So can I remind members what's been asked of the scrutiny to consider when coming up with their recommendations? We've been asked to consider the actions listed within the post-inspection action plan. We've been asked to assess whether the local authority is putting in place appropriate arrangements to support sustainable improvement, that's a mouthful, and address Estin's recommendations. And we've also been asked to make any comments and recommendations to the executive member where appropriate. So do members have any specific recommendations that they would like to make on this report? There is a couple on our questions. Yeah. Do you want to come up?
Yeah.
Bring us in? Thanks. Yeah.
I'll just come up with the three that came up throughout the meeting, if that's okay, members. Councillor Seaborn raised this one. With regards to elected members who are not governors, they miss out on very valuable professional training. Therefore, training for these members needs to be considered going forward. So that's one. And then the last two really were from Councillor Lucy Williams. Consider amending Appendix 2 so that success criteria and intended impacts can be seen more clearly for us readers, for us members. And that's certainly something which I think they need to consider in readiness for when you look at the next recommendation within your work programme. And then the last one then was to consider using colour-coded RAG statuses against each activity so progress can be clearly viewed. And again, maybe that's something they could take forward when you come to look at it next. There's two other bits of additional info which you also asked for. And that was the committee welcomes copy of progress against PEP updates that are presented to the Improvement Board, I think it was, on a regular basis, just for the committee's information. And then the last one then, John suggested that he could share a copy of the monitoring evaluation report with the committee for information so you can see how everything is linked together and how it's all working.
Brilliant. Thank you, Leanne and Geraint. Everybody happy with those recommendations? Are there any other recommendations that you wish to add? No? Anybody online? No? Okay. I think that's really useful. So, Leanne, over to you for agenda item 6 to go through the work programme, I believe.
Good grief, sorry, I forgot about this bit. Sorry, this is a short report from me providing the committee with all the relevant information for consideration when determining your next item to be scrutinised. So within Appendix 1, you've got your baskets of items which was selected at your visioning session in July 2022. So as you can see, our next item due to be looked at, if you're in agreement with that, is pupil attendance, persistent absentees, and that's on the 23rd of November. Appendix 2 is the Executive Forward Plan, and although no key decisions are required to be made at this present time, or there's none on the Executive Forward Plan, hopefully as we move on throughout the year, that will be populated and I will feed that information through to you at each committee meeting. And then Appendix 3 are obviously any external audit committee referrals which has been sort of passed down from the Governance and Audit Committee. And obviously our most recent one is the Estin report. And as far as I'm aware, no other applicable referrals have been received so far for the Education Overview and Scrutiny Committee to look at. Thank you.
So we've proposing that we take attendance. It's quite a priority at this moment in time. So our next meeting in November will be attendance. You are happy to take that? And I also need to make it clear that, you know, this basket is flexible. We choose it at the visioning session. It was a while ago, but if there's anything, you know, urgent emerging, then, you know, we just need to be able to alter our route a little bit and take that. But hopefully we've got everything that we need in the basket. So there we go. Everybody happy with that?
Yes. Yeah.
So the agenda item 7 is the date and the time of the next meeting. May I remind members that our meeting has been scheduled for the 23rd of November. I'd like to thank you all for your attendance, and I'd like to close the chamber. Thank you, members. Thank you for your ongoing support. I know it's a nightmare and all those packs and plans and everything. It's like you come off offline and you think, where is my head? I was like that yesterday. I woke up at 3 o'clock this morning thinking,